Okay, so let us talk about the consequences of running a tyrannical military system in any country. I said in the previous video that every country is succeed because of the benevolence of its military. Okay, if it protects the institutions of the land, the country succeed. If it does not, the country fails. Look at this thing. I'm speaking on a load shedding hour. The South African military has failed to preserve ESCOM. Cyril Ramaphosa did deploy soldiers now, but it's a bit too late, one would say. I hope that they succeed because it is the job of the military to make sure that these institutions are well run. So if there is a corruption in the in ESCOM, the South African military has to make sure that those that are investigating are also investigated, because we do understand that a pariah state is usually caused by the police and the military and the politician in cohorts to destroy the whole society. So if the South African military here right now, they have to be heroic. They have to be above Ramaphosa. They have to be above ESCOM, above it all, above the police commissioners, and really make sure that those who investigate, they are also investigated so that they are the right people to actually do the investigation. Because my suspicion that even the ones that are investigating are involved in the corruption. Therefore, South Africa will become a pariah state. See, in this video, I'm talking about the consequences of the failure of the military. So any failed state is the failure of the military, because the military has got the power and the prerogative to protect the nationhood of the country. It's not ANC that protects the sovereignty of South Africa. No, it's not ANC, it's the military. It's not ZANU-PF that protects the sovereignty of Zimbabwe. It's the Zimbabwean military. It's not the Democrats in the United States or the Republicans that protect the integrity of the United States. It is the US military. So it is important to understand the role of the military in actually making sure that the country succeeds. I said that I'm going to make this video about the consequences of a failed military, because I had said in the previous video that the constitution is not the highest order in any country. It may appear to be so in a country, right? Because everybody must follow the constitution. But what are the consequences of not following the constitution? Right? You will say you will be arrested. Well, it depends who you are. There are other people that cannot be arrested. What if those that arrest break the law? Who will arrest the arrester? You will discover that at the end of it all, for for policing systems to be preserved, the one who's above the police is the military. The one who's above even intelligence. Okay, there is intelligence involved. There's police. Intelligence is above police, but above intelligence is the military, because the intelligence. Let me start afresh. The police, they are the guys who make sure that the law is followed, right? If you break the law, they arrest you. Now, the intelligence, they are the guys who get to know what's going on, who strategically plan things for the country. They are the brains of the country, the central intelligence of any country. Now, but their brains cannot force people to do anything. Okay. What forces people to do things is a gun, the fear of death. What forces people to do things is the military. You see, we don't have to get there. That's why we've got the police. And you must listen to the police if you're a citizen. If you don't listen to the police, the intelligence will figure out a way of dealing with you. If they also cannot deal with you, the military is the last port of call. That is why you see Cyril Ramaphosa deploying the military at ESCOM, because the police have failed, the intelligence has failed. So the last port of call is the military. If the military fails, then that's it. That's game over, because the military is the guys who call the shots. Yet the military is a very secret organization that stays in the shadows and makes sure that things like the policing system function. But they are actually the police that police the police, but from the shadows. So if the police fail, the military comes in. Hence, I'm saying that if in any country, if the military disintegrates, if the military loses its moral high ground, the country becomes a pariah. The country loses its moral compass. Everything comes shutting down if the military loses it. And we've seen it in Zimbabwe. The military has lost it in Zimbabwe. That's why the country has failed. What is failed in Zimbabwe? It's not the Zimbabweans. It's the people in the Zimbabwean military. Zimbabweans are very well educated. They respect the rule of law. Zimbabweans actually respect the rule of law. They've been disrespected by persons in the military for all these years, but they still have not revolted. I mean, things like Arab Spring kind of revolts, and Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi kind of interventions. But the Zimbabweans have not been militant. Also, like you see in other African states, when the military of Zimbabwe misabuse them, they take passports, they go to South Africa, they go to UK, USA, look for a job. The military of Zimbabwe has been abusing them year in, year after, and they have not been there. Has been no retaliation whatsoever from the Zimbabwean citizens. However, you see that were people that work hard, the people that respect the rule of law, who wish that they had a functioning state, but the people that are actually in charge of those positions of authority to make sure that the country is functioning well have betrayed the population. You discover that the people in the Zimbabwean military are actually the people who fought the liberation war against white imperialism so that we black people can begin to rule ourselves in Zimbabwe. Only to come to a point whereby when they take those positions of authority, they do not understand that that is actually a sacred position which is difficult for an ordinary human being to hold unless you really are a selfless person. Because one of the mantras of the liberation war veterans is that they are selfless people who sacrifice their lives for the whole nation. My question now to the Zimbabwean military is that, are you still upholding to those values of selflessness and understanding that your job is actually sacred and you really are there for the sake of nationhood more than self? Because you discover that the same people that went to war are still holding the establishment of the Zimbabwe military since 1980 until now in 2023 and counting, and they've led us into a failed state because they have disrespected the institution of the land, and they have taken up to themselves to see these institutions as avenues of personal wealth accumulation instead of being the custodians and the protector of the realm of the country. What we need now is a military institution that realigns itself with this true liberation struggle values of maintaining peace and maintaining order within the political and financial world or systems of the nation. That is the job of the military in a nutshell. The job of the military is not to take sides, not to take sides of ZANU-PF or against or take sides of the Triple C. It's in a failed state where you hear politicians like Nelson Chamisa have to say we have got some in the military who support us. It's not supposed to be like that. We're not supposed to get to that place. The people in the military should not even support ZANU-PF or Triple C or ZEC. They must actually make sure that ZEC does its job, that is right, to elect the right people. And should make sure that nobody breaks the law. If you break the law, then the military should deal with you. That is when you are actually breaking our sovereignty. You are destroying the sovereignty of the nation. But however, the ones that are supposed to be the police of the police are the ones who are actually destroying the sovereignty of the nation because they failed to self-discipline. Remember, in the military, one of the biggest training features is self-discipline. It's amazing that an institution that is supposed to produce people that are self-disciplined, they have utterly failed in self-disciplining themselves, in not going into Marange diamonds. Because when there was, those that fiasco in the diamonds mines of Marange, the military was supposed to go there to restore order, not to kill people and talk over the diamonds for their own personal gain. Do you understand? This is a rock state of a nation. We don't really are a country anymore, we're a rock state. A proper state, you will have the military going in there and putting order and saying, oh, okay, what does the law say about mining diamonds? who has got the right and who doesn't have the right, and how are they going to contribute to the national fiscus and stuff like that. The military is supposed to maintain that order and not be there for profit, not even for the profit of the military itself. The military is not supposed to be run as a profit making organizations. I don't understand why we have the Zimbabwe defense industries that actually are in mining. Well, I do understand when they are in the business of making military weapons, but not in mining and other industries. Because right now they become a player when they're supposed to be the referee. Okay, you cannot be a referee in a match and then you begin to declare yourself a team, and you're carrying the whistle and you're blowing the whistle and saying, "Whew," telling the players to stop touching the ball. You go touch the ball, go to the ref, go to the what you call it, to the goalkeeper, and then you instruct the goalkeeper to lie on the floor, or else you're gonna give him a red card. And then he lies on the floor, and then you kick the ball goes in, and then you say it's a goal. You will win. You will win. You are the ref, you're the one who makes the rules. Nobody can do anything to you. So the military is not supposed to be the player. It's supposed to be the referee. Okay. But because the people in the institution of refereeing are human beings who fail to keep their hands off the cookie jar, who are tempted, because this is a big temptation, and hence the military teaches self-discipline. I must remind our commanders that they have taught self-discipline. That is the kind of self-discipline that is needed. Financial self-discipline to see the potential of stealing funds, of breaking the constitution, but not breaking it because you understand who you are and understand your role in the nation. So the failure of the military there of Zimbabwe is when we see them going to the Marange Diamonds field and begin to be the ones who kill people. Okay, people were killed. That is well documented, and taking over the mines and mining and making money. But when that money is made, which is what really amazes me, when that money is made, since the military belongs to the government or to the nation, that profit must belong to the country, right? You would so where do the profits of the military go to? Who who is responsible? I mean, for the distribution of those profits? Are they not supposed to go to the national treasury and build roads, schools, and other government, programs? You would think that's what happens, but yet in Zimbabwe, our military defense industry has got in mining interests across the mining structure, has got interests in multiple business sectors, which means that they surely make a whole lot of profit, yet we do not see the proceeds from there. We do not see development in key infrastructure in the country. The only infrastructure that we see being built are the infrastructure that only facilitate for more and better extraction of resources. For example, Zimbabwe has got a satellite. They launched a satellite. Who needs a satellite when we don't have schools? Except from the one who wants to use that satellite for the purposes of pinpointing the mines and the minerals that are in the country. So they will spend millions, if not billions, for that satellite because it helps them extract the wealth of the nation much easier, much more securely. So you see, all investments are geared towards these wealth extraction processes more than actually taking care of the citizens. When it comes to the citizens, the government has actually what you call it, they've invested in passports. One thing that you can get in Zimbabwe, one government service that works perfectly, is the passport office because they want Zimbabweans to get passports and get out of the country. So you see, I mean, the Westerners in the last 100 years, when they want to attack Africa and take the resources, they brought diseases. Look at DRC Congo. When Belgium took over DRC, they were cutting the Congolese hands, spreading diseases in Congo, killing lots of Congolese so that they can take the minerals of Congo. They also came and brought HIV/AIDS to Africa, hoping to wipe the populations of Africa and took over the resources. Right? It's the same strategy. Right now, the ZANU-PF together with the Chinese and Russians are using the same strategy of removing the population of Zimbabweans from Zimbabwe by making sure that they suffer. And I said, you need to understand why the suffering in Zimbabwe is actually manufactured. because when you are a Zimbabwean and you're made to suffer, okay, the economy doesn't work. So it's part of a ZANU-PF China Russia plan to cause the what you call it, the economy to fail, so that people will suffer, and when people suffer they get passports to go to South Africa, to go to the United Kingdom and become nurses and become low wage earners there. They begin to live hard jobs. They are doing hard labor, being paid peanuts. So the impoverishment of the Zimbabweans around the world is really something that ZANU-PF likes, something that China likes, something that Putin likes, and it works in favor. I mean, the British began to be, I mean, to resist change in Zimbabwe, or they're not really serious about Zimbabweans succeeding because, well, we provide them with cheap labor. So ZANU-PF, I mean, essentially ZANU-PF provides the United Kingdom. Oh God, I've got a cramp. The ZANU-PF provides the United Kingdom with cheap Zimbabwean labor. Okay, so if you're Rishi Sunak and the guys in the British Parliament, and then you're seeing cheap labor coming from Zimbabwe of because of I mean, through Brexit, you fired all of your uh, Eastern Europe nurses. So now you need another source of cheap labor, well educated but cheap labor. I mean, Emerson Mnangagwa comes, okay, I'm gonna offer you the Zimbabweans, okay, just open your gates to the Zimbabweans in the United Kingdom, and I'll give them passports. I mean, really, they are suffering here, so they will come and become cheap labor to the UK. So you begin to see that the United Kingdom, the Parliament of the United Kingdom, has got very little incentives of actually making Zimbabwean work. Because if Zimbabwe works, it means that they're going to lose the Zimbabweans in the United Kingdom who are working there as cheap labor. They will come back and rebuild their country, and therefore the United Kingdom will have to find other Africans to be cheap labor. But then you see other African countries, cannot speak English as well as the Zimbabweans. They are from francophone countries, or even if they are English speaking countries, but their education level is so low, and they're probably unemployable in the British economy. So the people that are employable, I mean, in the British economy are Zimbabweans, and so having a failed Zimbabwe uh, works to the interests of British businesses and the British economy. So you can see that uh, the British Parliament, Rishi Sunak, as rich as he is, the rich Sunak, the Indian, I mean, okay, I don't want to go there. I was going to go to another place, but let me leave the Indians for now. I'm going to roast them on another day, especially the ones that are here in South Africa. I'm going to roast them on another day. But now let's talk about the British, and we're saying that, I mean, as an Indian, Rishi Sunak really the yeah. I'm not gonna roast them another day. I'm gonna roast them today. If you're living in this country, South Africa, and you are working for Indians, like I have, and you've been around that environment, you can understand what that they love black cheap labor, and they don't pay. They pay peanuts, absolute peanuts in South Africa, absolute peanuts. I know that from experience. I know you don't read about it from the newspaper. I know it from my own experience, my own seeing how Indians do not pay in South Africa. And when we've got an Indian rich Sunak hey, if you're in Ndebele, you know that thing. Rich Sunak. Oh God. Rich Sunak, a rich guy, wants cheap labor from Zimbabwe. Do you think that he'll want Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF to be out of power? No. So you begin to see that the global capital in the West, the nefarious type, the bad apples in the United Kingdom, because there's bad apples there as well. The bad apples who would not want Zimbabwe to be free. They will use their political access to make sure that the British Parliament does not take a path that may lead to the freedom of Zimbabwe, because they want cheap labor. So if Emerson Mnangagwa participates in that trade-off, gives UK cheap labor, and then let me ZANU-PF be in power and do as I please. But I've always said that it's gonna backfire because the resources that the Chinese and the Russians are extracting from Zimbabwe, they are going to use that to weaponize themselves and attack Europe and that United Kingdom that thinks that it is clever by keeping Emerson Mnangagwa in power. So it's foolishness for United Kingdom to seek policies that keep ZANU-PF in power because they get cheap Zimbabwean labor. Because that cheap Zimbabwean labor comes at a huge cost that the UK economy and the UK society cannot even afford. Because that cheap Zimbabwean labor leaves Zimbabwe and 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 goes to the UK, but behind left is a coalition of Mnangagwa, Putin, and Xi, who are stealing the resources of Zimbabwe. They give Mnangagwa peanuts, really. The rest goes to Xi and Putin uses that money to 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 arm his nation, invade Ukraine, and fight NATO and fight the United Kingdom. So at the end of the day, United Kingdom will realize that they are actually sponsoring their own demise by keeping Emerson Mnangagwa in power. So this thing comes back to bite Rishi Sunak. So if he's a clever dude, instead of just smiling, that guy smiles all the time. As if like he is actually smiling and doing some economic progress. There's no progress. I am not going to be fooled by prime minister smiles. I want to see policies that actually transform communities and make that live better instead of just having a prime minister who just smiles. So Richie Sunak and his conservative guys in the British Parliament, they need to recognize that they are actually sponsoring Vladimir Putin by keeping Mnangagwa in power and having this trade-off with Mnangagwa, that Mnangagwa give us cheap labor and we will not push any international pressure to have ZANU-PF and the Harare government respect the rule of law and create an economy that is sustainable, that works for everybody else. So Richie and his friends in the UK Parliament think that they are very clever, so they want to get cheap labor and let ZANU-PF do as it pleases. But as I'm saying to you that ZANU-PF benefits Russia and China, and Russia and China will use that leverage to have this hegemony over Europe, including the United Kingdom, not the Europe and the United Kingdom. And then after that, you will begin to see the firepower of the Zimbabwean resources destroying Britain through Russia, through Emerson Mnangagwa, through Richie Sunak and the Conservative Party's insistence of keeping ZANU-PF in power and Zimbabwe a failed state. So if British wants to preserve its own prosperity, they really need to understand that they need to partner with the Zimbabweans. These so-called low-wage earners in Zimbabwe are very useful in actually keeping. They're very useful if you free them, if you help them to free Zimbabwe, and they go back to Zimbabwe to build their nation instead of having their resources get drained by the Chinese and the Russians. You will begin to be able to admit Zimbabwe into the Commonwealth, and then you will begin to have access to those resources. Britain having access to those resources instead of Russia and China having access to those resources, because Britain would have put in place systems of governance or supported systems of governance that work well, that function well in Zimbabwe, aiding the next government that is going to come in Zimbabwe to build a society that works for everyone in the Commonwealth, in the British Commonwealth. Remember, Zimbabwe is applying for membership into the British Commonwealth. So I envision a time when sense knocks into those parliamentarians in Britain and begin to realize that the British economy itself relies in a successful British Commonwealth, not just